Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew, and welcome to The Rampart. This is episode 3, and today we're going to talk about angels. What I find kind of interesting is over the years, I've had some deep conversations with people about all kinds of stuff in the Bible. And the one thing that I've noticed is when you start talking about angels and demons, people kind of get a little weird. They kind of just starting out in their heads like, oh yeah, but they don't actually want to have a deep discussion about it. We all believe in Christ. We all believe in the resurrection. We all believe in God. But it just seems like sometimes some people just don't want to have that conversation. So today I want to talk about the examples that I was able to find in the Bible that cover what angels do and how they played out God's purpose. The first example in the Bible I want to talk about is Genesis 18. The Lord appeared again to Abraham. One day Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent on the hottest part of the day. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground. "My lord," he said, "if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of this tree while water is brought to wash your feet. And since you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before you continue on your journey." "All right," they said, "do as you have said." So Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, "Hurry, get 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough, and bake some bread." Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf and gave it to his servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and then roasted the meat and served it to the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees. "Where is Sarah, your wife?" the visitor asked. "She's inside the tent," Abraham replied. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife, Sarah, will have a son." Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is so old?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, 'Can an old woman like me have a baby?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh." But the Lord said, "No, you did laugh." When the men got up from their meal and looked out towards Sodom, "Should I hide my plan from Abraham?" the Lord asked. For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out so that way he will direct his sons and their families to keep them the way of the Lord, doing what is right and just. So I really like this encounter with God and Abraham. Previous to this encounter and the visitors coming, only God and Abraham knew that God had promised a child to Abraham. So when the 3 visitors came up and one of them said, "I will return at this time next year and you'll have a son," that's when Abraham knew that that was God. The other 2 visitors were angels that would go on to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. So in Genesis 18, verse 16, "Then the men got up from their meal and looked out towards Sodom. As they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. So the Lord told Abraham, I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so fragrant. I'm going to go down to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know." The other men turned and headed towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living there in the city. Will you still sweep it away and not spare it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why would you be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same? Surely you don't want to do that. Should not the judge of all of the earth do what is right?" So Abraham and God have this conversation while the other 2 visitors walk off to Sodom and Gomorrah. So in Genesis 19, that evening the 2 angels came into the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "come to my home and wash your feet, and be my guests for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way again." "Oh no," they replied, "we'll just spend the night here in the city square." But Lot insisted, so that at last they went home with him. Lot prepared a feast for them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate. But before they retired for the night, the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so we can have sex with them." So Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. "Please, my brothers," he begged, "do not do such wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you so you can do as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they're my guests and under my protection." "Stand back," the angel shouted. "This fellow came to town as an outsider." The angels reached out and pulled Lot into the house and bolted the door. Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house, so they gave up trying to get inside. Meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot. "Do you have any other relatives here in the city?" they asked. "Get them out of this place, your son-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone else, for we are about to destroy the city completely. The outcry against this place is so great that it has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, "Quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it." But the young men thought he was only joking. At dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. "Hurry," they said to Lot. "Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Get out right now, or you will be swept away in destruction of the city." When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hands, the hand of his wife and 2 daughters, and rushed them to safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful. When they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, "Run for your lives, and do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away." "Oh no, my lord," Lot begged. "You have been so gracious to me and saved my life, and you have shown such great kindness. But I cannot go to the mountains. Disaster would catch up to me there, and I will soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved." "All right," the angel said. "I will grant your request. I will not destroy the little village, but hurry, escape to it, or I can do nothing until you arrive there." This explains why the village was known as Zoar, which means little place. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. He utterly destroyed them, along with the other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all of the people and every bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife looked back as she followed behind him, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. Abraham got up early that morning and hurried to the place where he had stood in the Lord's presence. He looked across the plain toward Sodom and Gomorrah and watched as columns of smoke rose from the cities, like smoke from a furnace. But God had listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe, removing him from the disaster that engulfed the cities and the plains. So what stands out to me in these 2 chapters is that God wanted to come down from heaven to physically see what was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. He came and he actually encountered Abraham and told him the things that only him and Abraham had talked about. It also shows the power that God gives angels, the ability to destroy cities. Another important thing is that in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2, it urges us to practice hospitality, because we may entertain angels without realizing it. And that Abraham's treatment of the 3 strangers may have been the background for the verse for Hebrews. It's an example that we need to follow, because we never know who we're encountering on a daily basis. So another example of angels in the Bible is Genesis chapter 32, when Jacob wrestles with God. Verse 22, "During the night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, and his 11 sons, and crossed the river. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all of his possessions. Jacob was left alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn. When the man saw he would not win the match with Jacob, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, 'Let me go, for the dawn is breaking.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' 'What is your name?' the man asked. He replied, 'Jacob.' 'Your name will no longer be Jacob,' the man told him. 'From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won.'" So I think the important thing with the angel visiting Jacob is it represents our struggles, how we struggle to maintain a relationship with God. It may symbolize a lifelong struggle spiritually over our own imperfections and the destiny that God has for us. The next story in the Bible I want to talk about is Daniel. And we'll look at Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made a statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, and magistrates, and all of the officials to come up to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then Herald shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, or harp, or pipes, or other instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshipped the golden statue. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king. You issued a decree requiring all people to bow down and worship the golden statue when they hear the sound of the music. That decree also stated that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego? I know I'm messing those names up. Whom you put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, Majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the golden statue you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a fit of rage and ordered the three men to be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to him, "Is it true that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the golden statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power?" The three men replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are to be thrown into a blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power. Even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you that we will never serve your gods, your worship, or worship the golden statue you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar became so furious with the men that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated up 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind the men and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied him up and threw him into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the three men in. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped in amazement as he exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up the 3 men and throw them in the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men unbound walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "The 3 men, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So they stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around him and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell like smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise the God of these 3 men. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than to serve or worship any other god except their own. Therefore I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race, nation, or language, speak a word against the God of these men, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God that can rescue like this." So after that experience, Nebuchadnezzar starts praising God, and many years later, King Belshazzar is in charge. And in Daniel chapter 6, we'll cover Daniel in the lion's den. Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel and the 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling the government affairs, but they couldn't find any to criticize him or condemn him. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, Our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in the connection with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, "Long live King Darius?" I probably said that wrong. "We are all in agreement, we are administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into a den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked." So the king signed the law. But when Daniel learned about the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down, as usual, in his upstairs room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to God. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went straight to the king and reminded him about his law. "Did you not sign a law that for the next 30 days any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, will be thrown into a pit of lions?" "Yes," the king replied, "that decision stands, and it's an official law." Told the king that Daniel, one of their captives of Judah, is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. Hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, "Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of Medes and Persians, no law that the king signs can be changed." So at last the king gave the orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his place and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and could not sleep all night. Very early the next morning, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "Long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they could not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel was lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he trusted in his God. When the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel, he had them thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they could even hit the floor of the den. So we have here that it doesn't really cover what Daniel was experiencing inside the lion's den, but there was proof that God sent an angel down to protect Daniel. The next story in the Bible I want to talk about is in Luke chapter 1. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of the King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman. The Lord is with you." Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think of what the angel could mean. "Don't be afraid, Mary," the angel told her. For you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be very great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God gave him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end." Mary asked the angel, "But how can this happen? I'm a virgin." The angel replied, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the baby will be born and will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. What's more, your relative Elizabeth has become pregnant in her old age. People used to say she was barren, but she has conceived a son and is now in her 6th month. For the word of God will never fail." Mary responded, "I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true." And then the angel left her. So the next example is in the books of Acts, chapter 12. James is killed and Peter is imprisoned. So about that time, King Herod began to prosecute some believers in the church. He had the apostle James, John's brother, killed with a sword. When Herod saw how much this pleased the Jewish people, He also arrested Peter. This took place during the Passover celebration, when he imprisoned him, facing him under the guard of 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring Peter out for public trial after Passover. But while Peter was in prison, the church prayed for him. The night before Peter was to be placed on trial, he was asleep, fastened in 2 chains between 2 soldiers. Others stood guard at the prison gate. Suddenly there was a bright light in the cell, and the angel of the Lord stood before Peter. The angel struck him on the side to awaken him and said, "Quick, get up," and the chains fell off his wrist. Then the angel told him, "Get dressed and put on your sandals." And he said, "Now put on your coat and follow me," the angel ordered. So Peter left the cell, following the angel, but all the time he thought it was just a vision. He didn't realize it was actually happening. They passed the first and second guard post and came to the iron gate leading to the city, and this gate opened for them all by itself. So as they passed through and started walking down the street, the angel suddenly left them. Peter finally came to his senses. "It really is true," he said. "The Lord had sent his angel to save me from Herod and from what the Jewish leaders had planned to do to me." Another instance in the Bible about angels is after Jesus was crucified and placed in the tomb. In Matthew chapter 20, verse 11, Mary was standing outside of the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stood and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other sitting at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been laying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they have taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought it was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out loud. "Don't cling to me," Jesus said, "for I haven't yet ascended to the Father. But go, find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene found the disciples and told them, "I have seen the Lord," and then she gave them the message. So I want to apologize. I actually meant that last example was John chapter 20. So this is Matthew 28, following the resurrection. Early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and rolled aside the stone and sat on it. His face shone like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. When the angel spoke to the woman, he said, "Do not be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He has risen from the dead, just as he said it would happen. Come see where his body is laying. And now go quickly to tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. Remember what I've told you." The women ran quickly from the tomb. They were very frightened, but also filled with great joy, as they rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. As they went, Jesus met and greeted them, and they ran with him, grasped his feet, and worshipped him. And then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go tell your brothers to leave for Galilee, and I will see him there." The last example I want to talk about is in 2 Kings. King Hezekiah was the king of Judah, and a powerful empire from the Assyrians. I can't say the king's name, but they invaded Judea and had Jerusalem surrounded. The king of the invading army sent a message that said this. This message is for King Hezekiah of Judah. "Don't let your God, in whom you entrust, deceive you with promises that Jerusalem will not be captured by us. You know perfectly well that the kings of Assyria have done what they have done wherever they have gone. They have completely destroyed everyone who stood in their way. Why should you be any different? Have the gods of other nations rescued them, such nations as Gozan, Hara, Ziphrah, and the people of Eden? My predecessors destroyed them all. What happened to the king of Hamath and the king of Arpad? What happened to the other kings?" After Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it, he went up to the Lord's temple and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed this prayer to the Lord: "O Lord, God of Israel, you are enthroned between the mighty cherubim. You alone are a God of all kingdoms of the earth. You alone created the heavens and the earth. Bend down, O Lord, and listen. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to the words of defiance against the living God. It is true, Lord, The kings of Asharah have destroyed these nations, and they have thrown the gods of these nations into fire and burned them. But of course the Assyrians could destroy them, but they are not gods at all, only idols of wood and stone shaped by human hands. Now, O Lord, our God, rescue us from his power. Then all of the kingdoms of earth will know that you alone, O Lord, our God. In verse 35 of chapter 19, that night the angel of the Lord went out to the Assyrian camp and killed 185,000 soldiers. When the surviving Assyrians woke up the next morning, they found corpses everywhere. The king of Asharah broke camp and returned to his land and went home to his capital and stayed there. So all these stories kind of give me a couple points that I want to wrap things up with. The number one point is he promises us deliverance. He promises to deliver us from our enemies. He promises to deliver us from bondage and oppression. He promises deliverance from sin and death. And we do that by praying to God. We give him our problems. We don't lose faith. And God promises to deliver. Even if we're faced with uncertain death and we're on our knees praying and we die, we're still going to be delivered to God. Because of our true faithful, we don't start worshiping golden calves on a mountain. These are really good stories, and I feel like today's society, having discussions about angels is probably a lot more difficult than having if we had a time machine, we went back to the 1500s and we started talking about angels and demons, and guarantee people would sit down and talk for hours about their experiences and stuff. But I feel like Satan's doing a really good job at putting a veil over us and keeping us distracted by constantly keeping us on our phones or keeping us involved in like fake TV shows and everything. So it becomes the point that I feel like angels now are just these, people think of them as just these cartoon figures, and they're just some make-believe creatures when there's actual undisputable proof in the Bible that God gives us to remind us that they're real. So, I don't have any stories personally that I would think that I could share, but I would love to hear if anybody out there has encountered somebody or something that they think was angelic. You can send me a message on Facebook. You can follow the Rampart podcast on Facebook. You can also shoot me an email at the rampartpodcast@outlook.com. I'd love to hear it. So as a reminder, stay safe, and thanks for listening, everybody.